She cried. The billionaire would abandon her for his ex-lover, but one night, he claimed her and she got pregnant. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Dr. Tom's Love Tales, where every story is a journey of love, emotions, and heartwarming twists that remind us why the heart beats strongest when it finds its home. I'm Dr. Tom, and today I have something truly special prepared for your soul. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing our stories reach hearts all around the world. Also, if you enjoy heartfelt love stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new tale of romance and passion. Now settle in, dim the lights, grab your favorite blanket, perhaps, make that warm cup of tea, and let your heart open to a story that will remind you that extraordinary love finds us when we least expect it, but need it most. Let's begin. The rain hammered against the glass towers of Manhattan that Tuesday morning, creating rivers down the pristine windows of Holmes Publishing. 26-year-old Chandra Davis clutched her worn leather portfolio against her chest, her second-hand blazer slightly too big, but carefully pressed. Her literature degree hadn't prepared her for the crushing weight of student loans or the reality of living on ramen noodles while chasing her dreams in the publishing world. She rushed through the marble lobby, her thrift store heels clicking against the polished floor. This interview could change everything. Junior editor position at one of the most prestigious publishing houses in the country. Her heart pounded as she approached the elevator bank, praying she wouldn't be late. The brass doors began sliding shut just as she reached them. "Wait," she called out, her voice echoing in the vast lobby. A strong, masculine hand caught the doors, stopping them inches from closing. "Going up?" The voice was deep, warm, with an undertone that made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. Chandra looked up and felt her breath catch. The man standing before her was unlike anyone she'd ever encountered. Tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her careful professional facade. His suit was clearly custom-made, probably worth more than her rent for 6 months, but it was his eyes that held her captive. Kind, intelligent, with laugh lines that suggested he smiled often. "Yes, thank you so much," he managed, stepping into the elevator. The space suddenly felt intimate, filled with his presence, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. The elevator lurched suddenly as it began its ascent, throwing Chandra off balance. She stumbled directly into his arms, her portfolio flying open and sending her carefully organized papers floating around them like confetti. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Heat flooded her cheeks as his hands steadied her, strong and warm through the thin fabric of her blazer. For a moment, they stood frozen, her hands pressed against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. "Don't worry about it," he said softly, his voice gentler now. His hands remained on her arms, steadying her, and she felt an electric current run through her entire body at the contact. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine. Just mortified," she whispered, reluctantly stepping back to gather her scattered papers. He immediately knelt to help, their fingers brushing as they collected the sheets. Each touch sent unexpected shivers up her spine. "Which floor?" he asked as they stood, her papers neatly stacked in his hands. 15. "I have an interview with someone from the editorial department." A slow, mysterious smile spread across his face, transforming his already handsome features into something that made her knees weak. "Do you now?" "Well, I'm sure you'll do wonderfully." "I hope so. This job means everything to me," she found herself admitting, surprised by her own honesty with this stranger. "I can see that," he said, handing her the papers. Their fingers touched again, and this time neither of them pulled away immediately. "I'm Jimmy, by the way." "Chandra," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. When the elevator dinged at the 15th floor, he stepped out with her. "After you," he said, gesturing toward the reception area. Chandra's interview went better than she had dared hope. The editorial director, Mrs. Chen, was impressed with her thesis on contemporary American literature and her passion for discovering new voices. When she was offered the junior editor position on the spot, Chandra felt like she might float right out of her chair. It wasn't until her first day, 3 days later, that she discovered the truth about the mysterious man from the elevator. She was sitting in the conference room with the other new hires when the door opened and Jimmy walked in. But this wasn't just Jimmy. This was Jimmy Holmes, CEO and founder of Holmes Publishing, the 34-year-old billionaire who had built his empire from nothing after aging out of the foster care system. Their eyes met across the room, and that same electric current passed between them. He didn't miss a beat in his welcome speech, but she caught the slight curve of his lips when he introduced himself to the group. "You didn't tell me," she confronted him after the meeting, cornering him near the coffee station. "You didn't ask," he replied with that same mysterious smile that had captivated her in the elevator. "Besides, would it have changed anything?" "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "Maybe. I hope not," he said quietly, his blue eyes holding hers. "I liked talking to Chandra in the elevator. Just Chandra, not someone trying to impress the CEO." 3 weeks into her new job, Chandra had fallen into a rhythm. She loved the work, reading manuscripts, working with authors, being part of bringing stories to life. But she couldn't shake the awareness of Jimmy's presence in the building. The way her heart raced whenever she passed his office. She was editing a manuscript during her lunch break at the small coffee shop in the building's lobby when a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to find Jimmy standing there with 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, setting down what turned out to be her exact coffee order, a medium caramel macchiato with an extra shot and oat milk. "How did you?" she began, staring at the cup. "I pay attention to what matters," he said simply, sliding into the seat across from her. What was supposed to be a quick coffee break turned into an hour of the most engaging conversation Chandra had ever had. They talked about books, about the manuscripts she was working on, about the stories that moved them, and the authors who inspired them. "You see stories differently than most editors," Jimmy observed, watching her face light up as she discussed a debut novel about immigrant experiences. "There's something special about the way you understand characters, their motivations, what drives them." "I think everyone has a story worth telling," Chandra replied, then blushed at her own earnestness. "Even me?" he asked quietly, his voice dropping to something more intimate. "Especially you," she said without thinking, then immediately looked away, embarrassed by her boldness. But when she glanced back, his expression was soft, almost vulnerable, and she realized that beneath the billionaire exterior was a man who truly understood the power of stories, perhaps because his own had been so difficult. Have you ever had that instant connection with someone that felt like coming home? That moment when you meet someone and your soul whispers, "There you are." Let me know in the comments. Working late became their sanctuary. While the rest of Holmes Publishing emptied by 6, Chandra found herself staying until 9 or 10, perfecting manuscripts and losing herself in the stories. She told herself it was dedication to her craft, but deep down she knew she was hoping for those moments when Jimmy would appear in her doorway. "You know there are labor laws about working this late," he said one evening, startling her from a particularly engaging manuscript. Chandra jumped, knocking over her coffee mug. The warm liquid spread across her desk, threatening to ruin hours of work. Before she could react, Jimmy was there with napkins from the break room, helping her save the pages. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish this edit," she explained, feeling foolish as they worked together to clean up the mess. "Chandra," he said softly, and something in his voice made her look up. "When was the last time you went home? Really went home, not just to grab a few hours of sleep before coming back here?" She couldn't remember. Between her day job and freelance editing work to pay off her crushing student loans, home had become just a place to shower and change clothes. "Let me take you to dinner," Jimmy said, and before she could protest about workplace boundaries, he added, "As your boss, I'm concerned about your work-life balance." That evening, over pasta at a small bistro near the office, Jimmy revealed pieces of himself she never expected. He talked about growing up in the foster care system, bouncing between homes that never felt like home, about working 3 jobs while putting himself through college. "People see the success and assume I was born into privilege," he said, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "They don't see the years of sleeping in my car between finals, living on peanut butter sandwiches and library books." "I see it," Chandra said quietly. "The way you remember everyone's names in the mailroom, how you notice when someone's struggling. That doesn't come from privilege. It comes from understanding what it feels like to be invisible." Something shifted in Jimmy's expression, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "You really do see people, don't you?" When he walked her to her apartment building that night, their first kiss happened naturally, sweetly, under the glow of the streetlight. His lips were warm and gentle, tasting faintly of the wine they'd shared. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Jimmy rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he murmured. "Everything worthwhile is complicated," Chandra whispered back, surprised by her own boldness. 2 weeks of stolen glances and careful professional distance later, Jimmy appeared at her desk just as she was packing up for the day. "Chandra," he said, his voice lower than usual, "let me take you to dinner again. This time not as your boss concerned about work-life balance, but as a man who can't stop thinking about you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Jimmy, we shouldn't." "I know all the reasons we shouldn't," he interrupted gently, "but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just professional respect." The restaurant he chose surprised her, not some exclusive establishment where they might be seen by industry colleagues, but a tiny Italian place in Brooklyn, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. It was intimate without being ostentatious, real without pretense. "I wanted somewhere we could just be ourselves," he explained as they settled into a corner booth. "No titles, no expectations, just Jimmy and Chandra." Over homemade gnocchi and house wine, they peeled back layers of themselves they'd never shared with anyone. Chandra told him about her father's struggles with alcohol, about being the first in her family to graduate college, about the pressure she felt to prove she belonged in the literary world. Jimmy shared the loneliness of success, the weight of building an empire, while having no real family to share it with. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, he admitted. "But until I met you, I couldn't remember the last time I had a conversation that mattered." "What about friends, relationships?" Chandra asked gently. "Hard to know who wants Jimmy and who wants Jimmy Holmes, CEO, he said with a rueful smile. "You're the first person who seemed interested in me before you knew about the money." When they walked through her neighborhood afterward, Jimmy asked about her childhood, about the small Ohio town where she'd grown up dreaming of New York literary life. She pointed out her favorite bodega, the park where she sometimes sat to read manuscripts, the coffee shop where she'd written her college essays. "It's not glamorous," she said, suddenly self-conscious about her modest apartment building. "It's you," Jimmy replied simply. "That makes it perfect." At her door, their second kiss was deeper, more urgent. Chandra felt herself melting into him, her hands fisting in his jacket as he pressed her gently against the brick wall. "This changes everything," Jimmy said when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. "I know," Chandra whispered. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," he admitted with a shaky laugh. "But I haven't felt this alive in years." They kept their relationship secret at work, maintaining careful professional boundaries that fooled no one who paid close attention. But their evenings became precious, cooking together in Jimmy's penthouse kitchen, reading manuscripts aloud to each other, discovering they both cried at the same poetry and laughed at the same absurd plot twists. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Jimmy told her one evening as she stressed over a difficult manuscript. "I see how brilliant you are. I just want you to see it too." Meeting families was a delicate dance. Jimmy's chosen family, former foster siblings who had remained close despite being scattered across the country, welcomed Chandra with fierce protectiveness and genuine warmth. They shared embarrassing stories about teenage Jimmy's dreams of changing the publishing world and his terrible attempts at cooking. Now, when Jimmy met Chandra's parents at their modest suburban home, her mother whispered while they washed dishes together, "You know he looks at you like you hung the moon." "Mom," Chandra protested, but she couldn't hide her smile. "I'm serious, sweetheart. In 30 years of marriage, I've learned to recognize real love when I see it." A year into their relationship, Jimmy surprised Chandra by offering her a promotion to senior editor with her own imprint. "I don't want this because we're together," she said firmly when he presented the opportunity. "You're getting this because you're extraordinary at what you do," Jimmy replied. "I'd be a fool to let personal feelings override good business sense. Besides, I've seen your work. You deserve this regardless of who you're sleeping with." The promotion came with its own challenges. Some colleagues whispered about favoritism, while others treated her differently once they discovered she was dating the CEO. Chandra handled it all with grace, letting her work speak for itself, building a reputation based on the quality of books she published, rather than the man she loved. "I'm proud of you," Jimmy told her one evening as they celebrated her imprint's first bestseller. "Not just because I love you, but because you're exactly the editor I hoped you'd become when I saw your passion in that first interview." "You mean when I dumped my entire portfolio on your shoes?" Chandra laughed. "Even then," Jimmy smiled, pulling her close. "Especially then." 2 years after their first elevator encounter, Jimmy proposed in the most perfectly Chandra way possible. She discovered it on a quiet Sunday morning while browsing the rare books section of her home library. There, nestled between volumes of poetry, was a first edition of Jane Eyre, her favorite novel since childhood. Opening the cover, she found Jimmy's handwriting where the original dedication should have been. "To Chandra, who taught me that every story deserves a happy ending. You've shown me that love isn't just something we read about in books. It's something we create with our choices, our courage, and our commitment to each other. Will you write the rest of our story with me? Forever yours, Jimmy." The ring was tucked between the pages where Jane declares, "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me." It was a vintage emerald surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless, like the love they'd built together. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes," as Jimmy appeared in the doorway, his face anxious, until he saw her tears of joy. Their wedding 6 months later was intimate and perfect, held on the rooftop garden of Holmes Publishing, surrounded by hundreds of books and fairy lights. Towering shelves created natural alcoves filled with their favorite novels, poetry collections, and first editions that had brought them together. Chandra wore her grandmother's simple silk dress, altered to fit perfectly, while Jimmy chose a classic black tuxedo that made his blue eyes even more striking. Their chosen family surrounded them: Jimmy's foster siblings, Chandra's parents, and extended family, colleagues who had become genuine friends. When Jimmy spoke his vows, there wasn't a dry eye among their guests. "Chandra, you didn't just become my wife today, you became my home. Before you I had houses, apartments, places to sleep, but home was just a word in the books I published. You taught me that home isn't a place, it's a person. It's the way you make coffee exactly how I like it without being asked. It's how you read manuscripts aloud in different voices. It's the way you see the best in everyone, especially me. You are my home, my heart, my happy ending." Chandra's response was equally moving. "Jimmy, you've given me more than love. You've given me belief in myself. You see dreams in me that I was afraid to acknowledge. You've taught me that being loved doesn't mean being perfect. It means being seen, truly seen, and chosen anyway. I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day after that." The children cheered. Rebecca wiped away happy tears, and Jimmy pulled Chandra into his arms for a kiss that tasted like birthday cake and promises kept. The first year of marriage felt like a fairy tale. Chandra's imprint was gaining recognition in literary circles, publishing breakthrough novels from diverse voices that critics and readers loved equally. Jimmy supported her vision completely, even when it meant taking financial risks on unknown authors whose stories needed to be told. But success brought unexpected pressures. Jimmy's empire was expanding internationally, requiring frequent travel to London, Tokyo, and other publishing hubs around the world. Meanwhile, Chandra threw herself deeper into her work, determined to prove she belonged in the literary world on her own merits, not just as the CEO's wife. Their conversations began revolving around work schedules, missed dinners, and rescheduled date nights. The easy intimacy they'd cultivated seemed harder to maintain when they were passing each other like ships in the night. When they decided to start trying for a family, both assumed it would happen quickly. They were young, healthy, deeply in love. What could go wrong? But month after month brought disappointment. The stress of trying began affecting their relationship in ways neither had anticipated. Chandra started tracking everything: temperatures, cycles, timing, turning their love life into a medical procedure. Jimmy tried to be supportive, but he missed the spontaneous passion they'd once shared. "Maybe we're trying too hard," he suggested gently after another negative test. "Easy for you to say," Chandra snapped, immediately regretting her tone. "I'm sorry, I want this so much." "I want it too," Jimmy said, pulling her close. but I want you more. We don't have to have children to be complete." When Chandra finally got pregnant, they were cautiously overjoyed. But their happiness was short-lived. At 8 weeks, they lost the baby. The miscarriage devastated them both, but they grieved differently. Jimmy wanting to talk through their pain and support each other, while Chandra withdrew into work in silence. "We can try again," Jimmy said one night, holding her as she cried. "What if we can't? What if I can't give you the family you deserve?" Chandra whispered through her tears. "Then we'll find another way," he replied firmly. "You're all the family I need, Chandra. Everything else is just a bonus." Their second pregnancy made it to 12 weeks before they lost that baby too. This time, Chandra fell into a depression that frightened them both. She stopped editing with her usual passion, stopped eating regularly, stopped believing in happy endings, the very thing that had defined her career and worldview. Jimmy tried everything he could think of. He brought her favorite meals, suggested therapy, took time off work to be with her. But Chandra had built walls around her grief that even his love couldn't penetrate. It was Maria, their housekeeper, who finally broke through Chandra's isolation. Maria had worked for Jimmy for 5 years, a quiet woman in her 40s, who had emigrated from Colombia to support her teenage daughter's education. "Mrs. Chandra," Maria said one afternoon, finding Chandra curled on their living room couch, staring blankly at the wall. "You know, when I lost my first baby, I thought God was punishing me for something." "Walhar blovin sign sublegjai." Chandra looked up, surprised. Maria rarely shared personal details about her life. "My grandmother, she told me something that could maybe help you too," Maria continued, sitting gently on the edge of the couch. She said, "Sometimes God gives us broken hearts so we learn how much it can hold when it heals." The simple wisdom, offered with such genuine compassion, was the first thing that penetrated Chandra's grief in weeks. Maria's own loss, shared so generously, reminded Chandra that she wasn't alone in this pain. With Maria's gentle encouragement and Jimmy's unwavering support, Chandra began therapy. Dr. Patterson was a kind woman who specialized in pregnancy loss and helped Chandra understand that grief wasn't linear, that healing didn't mean forgetting, and that her worth as a woman wasn't tied to her ability to carry a pregnancy to term. Slowly, carefully, Chandra found her way back to herself. She began reading again, first just for pleasure, then returning to manuscripts with renewed appreciation for stories of resilience and hope. She and Jimmy started taking evening walks, talking about dreams beyond parenthood, rediscovering the friendship that had been the foundation of their love. A year later, when their fertility doctor suggested surrogacy, they were ready to explore new possibilities. The process led them to Rebecca, a teacher and single mother who had been a surrogate twice before. "I believe in love stories," Rebecca told them during their first meeting at the fertility clinic. She was beautiful in an understated way, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile, "and I can see yours is worth fighting for." Rebecca was everything they could have hoped for in a surrogate: educated, healthy, experienced, and genuinely caring. She had a 10-year-old daughter named Katie, whom she was raising alone after her divorce, and she spoke passionately about helping couples achieve their dreams of parenthood. The legal and medical processes moved smoothly, and within 2 months, Rebecca was pregnant with their baby. Chandra felt hopeful for the first time in years, cautiously planning the nursery and allowing herself to believe in happy endings again. But during Rebecca's 12-week appointment, a casual comment from the doctor changed everything. "It's wonderful that you and Jimmy found each other again after all these years," Dr. Martinez said cheerfully. "College sweethearts reuniting through surrogacy. It's like something out of a movie." Chandra's blood turned to ice. "I'm sorry, what?" Rebecca's face went pale. "Dr. Martinez, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "You know each other?" Chandra asked quietly, her voice dangerously calm. The drive home was silent, tension crackling between them like a live wire. Once they were behind closed doors, Chandra turned to face her husband. "You didn't think to mention this?" she said, her voice barely controlled. Jimmy ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she recognized as his tell when he was stressed. "It was 15 years ago, Chandra. Rebecca reached out through the agency specifically because she wanted to help us," she said. "Seeing our love story in the media coverage of your imprint made her remember what real love looked like. And you didn't think I had a right to know that our surrogate is your ex-girlfriend?" Chandra's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. She's not my ex-girlfriend, Jimmy said firmly. We dated for 6 months in college. It ended when she chose someone else, her eventual husband. There are no unresolved feelings, no hidden agenda. She genuinely wants to help us have a family. But Chandra felt the familiar walls of insecurity rising around her heart. Here was another woman who had known Jimmy before her, who had loved him first, who was now carrying their child. All her old fears about being temporary, about not being enough, came flooding back with devastating force. I need time to think, she said, turning away from him. Chandra, please, don't let the past destroy our future. I need time to think, she said, turning away from him. Chandra, please. But she was already walking upstairs, leaving Jimmy standing alone in their living room, wondering if the revelation that was supposed to bring them their greatest joy might instead tear apart everything they'd built together. The first few weeks after the revelation were tense. Chandra attended Rebecca's appointments out of obligation, maintaining polite distance while wrestling with her insecurities. But Rebecca's genuine warmth and complete transparency slowly began to chip away at Chandra's defenses. I know this is awkward, Rebecca said during a routine ultrasound appointment when Jimmy was traveling for business, and I understand why you're upset. If I were in your position, I'd probably hate me. I don't hate you, Chandra replied quietly, watching their baby move on the monitor screen. I feel like everyone knew Jimmy before I did. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just the latest chapter in his story, not his actual ending. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, studying Chandra's face. Can I tell you something? Jimmy and I were kids playing at being adults. We thought we knew what love was, but we were just two college students who liked the same movies and shared chemistry homework. What you two have, it's completely different. Over the following months, an unexpected friendship developed. Rebecca invited Chandra to her daughter Katie's soccer games, where they sat on bleachers talking about everything from literature to parenting fears. Rebecca shared stories about her failed marriage, her struggles as a single mother, and her decision to become a surrogate. My ex-husband never looked at me the way Jimmy looks at you, Rebecca said one afternoon as they watched Katie score a goal. Even when we were happy, even on our wedding day, there was never that completeness. Jimmy lights up when you walk into a room. He talks about you like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met. Really? Chandra asked, feeling foolish for needing the reassurance. Really? What we had was young love, intense but shallow. What you two have is the real thing. It's built on friendship, respect, shared dreams. I can see why he fell so hard for you. Rebecca helped Chandra understand Jimmy's past in ways he'd never been able to articulate himself. She shared how lost he'd been in college, brilliant but directionless, carrying the wounds of his foster care experience like invisible armor. You saved him, Rebecca said simply, not in some dramatic way, but in all the small daily ways that matter. You made him believe he was worthy of being loved for who he is, not what he's accomplished. When Chandra went into labor at 38 weeks, Jimmy was in London closing a major international deal. Rebecca drove her to the hospital, staying by her side through 12 hours of labor, holding her hand and coaching her breathing. She's almost here, Rebecca whispered as Chandra pushed through the final contraction. Baby Lily entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room with joy. Without hesitation, Rebecca placed the tiny perfect baby directly into Chandra's arms. She's been waiting for you, Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. Look at her, she knows her mama. Jimmy arrived 2 hours later, having chartered a private jet the moment he got Chandra's text. When he walked into the hospital room and saw his wife holding their daughter, he broke down completely. She's perfect, he whispered, touching Lily's tiny hand with one finger. You're both perfect. 6 months after Lily's birth, Chandra made a discovery that shocked them both. She was pregnant naturally. After years of fertility struggles, treatments, and heartbreak, her body had somehow healed itself. I'm terrified, she admitted to Jimmy, staring at the positive pregnancy test. What if we lose this one too? What if my body can't handle carrying a baby? Then we'll survive it together, just like we've survived everything else, Jimmy replied, his hand covering her still flat stomach. But I have a feeling this time is different. You're different. We're different. The pregnancy was monitored closely, but everything progressed normally. David James Holmes arrived healthy and strong, a mirror image of his father with the same piercing blue eyes and determined chin. 2 babies in 18 months, Jimmy marveled as he held David while Chandra nursed Lily. "Our house is about to get very loud. I can't wait," Chandra laughed, feeling more complete than she ever had in her life. 2 years later, they received another surprise. Twins, Rose and Jimmy Jr., arrived 6 weeks early, but healthy, filling their home with the beautiful chaos of 4 children under 4 years old. Rebecca remained part of their extended family, often joining them for holidays and special occasions. She had remarried a kind man named Thomas, who adored both her and Katie, and their blended families became close friends. Katie considered herself the twins' honorary big sister, and the children grew up knowing the beautiful story of how Aunt Rebecca had helped bring their family together. Years passed in a blur of bedtime stories, school plays, soccer games, and family vacations. Holmes Publishing expanded to include a children's imprint, with Chandra writing picture books inspired by their family's journey. Stories about different kinds of families, about love that multiplies rather than divides, about the many ways people can come together to create something beautiful. On Chandra's 40th birthday, their home was filled with laughter and love. Lily, now 12 and already showing signs of her parents' love for literature, had organized a surprise party. David, 10 and practical like his father, had handled the logistics. The 8-year-old twins had made decorations that covered every available surface in glitter and construction paper hearts. Rebecca and Thomas were there with Katie, now 22 and pursuing her master's degree in education. Jimmy's foster siblings had flown in from across the country. Chandra's parents, now proud grandparents who spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly, helped serve cake. As the evening wound down, Jimmy stood to give a toast. The children quieted, knowing their father's toasts were special occasions. 15 years ago, Jimmy began, looking at his wife across their crowded living room. "I thought I knew what love was. Then I met a woman in an elevator who taught me that love isn't just about the happy moments. It's about choosing each other through every chapter, especially the difficult ones. Chandra showed me that real love doesn't just accept your past, it helps you heal it. It doesn't just see your potential, it helps you reach it." He raised his glass, his voice growing thick with emotion. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible. Not just our beautiful children, but a life filled with purpose, joy, and the kind of love poets write about. Here's to the next 40 years of our story." Chandra stood, tears in her eyes, and raised her own glass. "You know what I love most about our story?" she said, looking around at their chosen family, their children, the life they'd built together from that chance encounter in an elevator. "It's that it's still being written." The children cheered. Rebecca wiped away happy tears, and Jimmy pulled Chandra into his arms for a kiss that tasted like birthday cake and promises kept. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the children were finally asleep, Chandra and Jimmy sat on their back porch swing, watching the stars. "Do you ever think about that morning in the elevator?" Chandra asked, her head on Jimmy's shoulder. "Every day," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Best malfunction in elevator history. I was so scared that day. Scared I wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, good enough for any of it. And now?" Chandra smiled, thinking of their 4 sleeping children, her successful imprint, the love story that had exceeded every dream she'd dared to have. "Now I know that sometimes the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. The ones that start with being brave enough to step into an elevator with a stranger and end with forever." "This isn't the end," Jimmy corrected gently. "This is just the end of chapter 1. We've got a whole lifetime of chapters left to write." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Chandra realized that she'd finally learned the truth she'd been seeking all those years ago. She wasn't temporary in Jimmy's life. She was permanent, essential, home, and their love story was still being written, one beautiful day at a time. My precious Dr. Tom's family, as we near the end of Chandra and Jimmy's beautiful journey, I want you to know that your love story is still being written too. Whether you're single and waiting, married and struggling, or somewhere in between, your happy ending is possible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Like it if it touched your heart. And tell me in the comments, what part of their story resonated most with you? I read every single comment because your hearts matter to me. Chandra learned that love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about two people committed to writing their happy ending together. She expected to be abandoned, but instead she was chosen. She feared she was temporary, but she became his forever. Beautiful souls, maybe you're like Chandra was, expecting the worst, protecting your heart, believing you're not enough. But what if you're wrong? What if you're exactly what someone has been praying for? What if your story is just beginning? Remember, love doesn't always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as friendship, sometimes as a challenge, sometimes as a second chance. But when real love finds you, it doesn't just accept your past, it helps you heal it. It doesn't just see your potential, it helps you reach it. Until our next story, keep believing in love, keep choosing hope, and keep writing your beautiful chapter. You are worthy of extraordinary love, and your story is far from over.